Hi, folks. I'm Peter Lemieux with Rounding Third Batter Sports. I tell baseball stories. Most of my baseball stories I try to make uplifting. I try to talk about American history. I try to tell stories about people that are somewhat inspiring and motivational. But baseball is made up of human beings. Not all of them were good. Today I'm going into the dark side. I want to talk about one of the most notorious and hated baseball owners in the history of the game. Now, just to try to balance the sheet a little bit, I did tell a story about a great owner who I absolutely like a lot. His name was Bill Veeck, and if you go into my archives, maybe you can dig up the story on Bill Veeck, a great and exciting owner with a wonderful story. But today we're going over, like I said, to the dark side. I want to talk about an owner of the Cincinnati Reds named Marge Schott. Let me get the good stuff out of the way first, because the bad stuff's pretty bad. Marge Schott was a well-known philanthropist. She donated much money in the Cincinnati area and was well loved for it. She gave to the Cincinnati Children's Hospital, Children's Zoo, where they were so, you know, thankful of her gifts, they named an elephant after her pet dog. To the Boy Scouts Camp Friedlander, she gave so much money they named the Lake Marge Schott in her honor. She was a huge donor to the University of Cincinnati. In fact, they even named their baseball stadium the Marge Schott Stadium. It has since been changed, but that was some of the good things. So let me address, how did Marge get all her money? She inherited a lot from her dad, who was wealthy from the lumber business. Then she married a guy named Charles Schott, who was a member of a very wealthy Cincinnati family. She married him in 52. When he died in 68, she inherited several automobile dealerships that he owned. So Marge had no problems with money. That's why she gave so much away. In 1981, she bought a minority interest in the Reds, and in 1984 became a majority owner. And that's when things started to change. Because at that time, Marge had such a big personality, she wanted that known. One of the things she wanted to do is be somebody good for the fans. That was what she had in her mind. So she charged only $1 for hot dogs. She had box seats for $12. In fact, the Reds had the lowest price to get into a game of any major league team. Now, the powerhouse Cincinnati Reds teams, the big red machine with Johnny Bench and all the great hitters they had, Hall of Fame players, they played in the 70s. This was the 80s, and Marge came in to run the team. So while she was doing all those good things for the people, she would go around and meet the people and sign autographs. She always had with her pet dog. Was a Saint Bernard dog. You know, those big dogs, they drool a lot. And she took that dog into the games, into the locker rooms. And one of the things she did that drove people crazy is she would let the dog run around the field and defecate on the grass of the field, and which then the employees of the Cincinnati Reds, including from time to time the players, had to go out and pick up the dog poop. Shotzi was the name of the dog, and he was not well liked by any of the players. So Marge takes over, and she does not like spending money on the team. For example, she cut down on scouts. She didn't understand why she would pay people to just sit around watching baseball games. She thought it was a waste of money. She thought a lot of things were a waste of money, like paying good players. She she complained. They won one World Series when she was there, and the star pitcher in the World Series was a guy by the name of Jose Rio. Well, he got on the disabled list a year or two later with an elbow injury, and she publicly complained about having to pay him his salary. She would say, I'm paying that guy $3 million to sit on his butt. And that didn't go over with Jose and a lot of the players. She had the smallest and lowest paid front office in all of the major leagues. She was said to have turned down the heats and lights to save on electricity. The one World Series they won while she was there was in 1990. It was an interesting team. I looked back on that. That was a team that no one picked to win the World Series. They had decent players, but nothing that would make you stand out like the Big Red Machine. They had an incredible bullpen. Some of you may remember 1990. The bullpen was called the Nasty Boys. She had three players there, and they were just threw a lot of heat, and they had no problems throwing at batters. But she had like three closers on this team. And they went on to win the pennant, win the playoffs, go into the World Series, and they swept the Oakland A's because of these nasty boys. What did Marge do? She complained that they swept the series because she would have made more money if it had gone 6 or 7 games. She was so upset about that, she refused to pay for the post game celebration after winning the World Series. That celebration was paid for by the players because she refused to pay for it. The manager of the team was Lou Piniella. He got sued 2 years later by an umpire for defaming him, and she refused to pay the defense of Lou Piniella for his arguments with the umpires. So Lou immediately left the team. She had some horrible quotes that came out from people who quit and couldn't stand working for her. A lot of them were racial, so I'm not going to choose to use the exact words she used. But she had two really good black players on her team. Dave Parker recently went in the Hall of Fame, and Eric Davis. She referred to them openly as her $1 million N word. She would call them that in public. She had a Jewish guy working for her, but she proudly displayed a swastika armband in her office. And she was commonly quoted as saying, sneaky GD Jews are all alike. Let me tell you, she was not making herself popular. She could not understand how referring to Asian people as Japs was offensive. She said to the New York Times, believe it or not, I never want to hire another insert N word. I'd rather have a trained monkey working with me than an N word. She complained that she didn't like Asian kids outdoing our kids in high school, only she didn't call them Asian kids. That would have been politically correct. So we have a woman who doesn't spend any money on the team, on the office, shuts off the lights, makes the players pick up poop. And you have a woman that in the world of baseball is universally hated. There was a famous wrestler named Randy Macho Man Savage. And on their own, the broadcasters had him come up between innings of a game, and he was going to sit there and talk about wrestling and baseball with them. She immediately sent a message over to kick that guy out of the booth. And she did, embarrassing the staff, especially the announcers, one of whom was Tom Brenneman, who had a big fight with her after that. But you know, you could fight with Marge, but you weren't going to win. She didn't want her players wearing earrings. Listen to this quote. Because she said, only fruits wear earrings. I mean, we're just sitting here saying, you got to be kidding me. She said all this stuff publicly. She had a long-standing rule that players couldn't have facial hair. She offered to Hall of Famer Raleigh Fingers an opportunity to come and play for the Reds, but contingent on shaving his famous mustache. Obviously, he didn't do it. The manager of their World Series championship team was a guy named Davey Johnson, who would go on and manage the New York Mets in 1986. Actually, I think he managed the Reds after the Mets, but that's irrelevant. She told him in the middle of the year that it didn't matter how his team was going to do, she was going to fire him at the end of the year. The reason being, she found out he was living with his fiancee before they got married. And in fact, he did marry her a year later, but that didn't matter to Marge. They won the pennant, they went to the playoffs, and were swept in the National League Championship Series. So they didn't quite make it to the World Series. But afterwards, immediately, Davey Johnson was fired. Here's another beauty from Marge. 1996, a game in Montreal. Umpire John McSherry took ill and upon leaving the field collapsed. They postponed the game. McSherry was taken to the hospital and died. So, of course, that was just a horrible thing for baseball and everything like that. First, she complained that they postponed the game. She thought it wasn't necessary. And then she sent flowers to the Umpires Association for John McSherry. The problem was this was re-gifted flowers given to her by one of her television affiliates. She took a gift and re-gifted it to the umpires. Of course, they heard about that, and it turned into a huge feud between the umpires and Marge Schott. Let me give you one more. She was on an airplane once, and a woman introduced herself as Ed Roush's granddaughter. So here's what Marge says. That's nice, hon. What business is he in? Ed Roush is in the Hall of Fame as a center fielder for the Cincinnati Reds. And she asked, what business was he in? It went on and on and on. So they suspended her. And for a couple of years, she was suspended and eventually was forced to absolutely sell her interest in the team. That's not a legacy or a story that you want to pass on to your children about what a beautiful sport baseball is and how baseball hired Jackie Robinson and broke the color barrier in sports. Those are good baseball stories. This is a story where you just close your eyes and shake your head and say, who invited this person into the dance? But she was there. She's part of our history. It's a history that points out it doesn't matter what business you're in. Bad people show up. Well, Marge may have given a lot of money to the zoo and to the hospital and to the university, but she's really a horrible person. She was horrible to her players. She was horrible to her staff. She was a woman filled with all kinds of prejudice and hate. But for a few years, she owned the Cincinnati Reds. So it's not a proud story that I tell, but it's part of our history. And now maybe you understand why when you hear about Marge Schott and her dog Shotzi, Shotzi died. And she got another dog just like him and called him Shotzi too, who could run around the field and leave his hair in the locker rooms and poop on the field. That was Marge. And no one liked her. Not the umpires, not the players, not the people who worked for her. And they had to put up with her for several years. But it's part of our story. So I tell you that story not to uplift you, but to say, look there's bad people everywhere, right? There's bad preachers and priests. There's bad policemen. There's bad school teachers. And we have some very bad owners. Marge may be at the top of the list. Well, that's my story today. I hope you enjoyed it. Check my archives to see other stories. Please follow, like, subscribe, all the stuff you're supposed to do to help us grow this business. I always enjoy talking about baseball, and I'm really pleased that several of you follow this. If you want to write about Marge or anything else you may want to comment on, please feel free. And I'll look forward to seeing you the next time at Rounding Third. And I'm Peter Lemieux. Have a great day.